For decades, political science relied on a standard assumption: a regime's survival and a leader's popularity depend on consistent economic growth. A sharp downturn usually fractures public consent. Look at Russia in 2014. Global oil prices tumbled, and Western-led sanctions crippled the national economy. By traditional metrics, the incumbent administration faced a massive collapse in public support. Plotting Russian GDP against Putin's approval ratings between 2013 and 2014 shows an inverse reaction. His approval climbs from the low 60s, peaking at 86%. This defies political gravity, demonstrating economic performance ceased to anchor public consent for the Kremlin. China experienced a similar divergence during the 2010s. Xi Jinping inherited a state accustomed to double-digit economic expansion, only to confront a severe structural slowdown. Xi did not lose his grip on the state as growth cooled. Instead, he successfully engineered the removal of presidential term limits, elevating his absolute authority over the party apparatus. When the promise of perpetual wealth fades, modern autocrats do not default exclusively to brute force. They deploy authoritarian stagecraft, a highly advanced system of narrative engineering designed to manufacture consent. Tracking the parallel evolutions of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping reveals a shared operational blueprint. This is the exact mechanism they use to preempt political alternatives and centralize absolute power. The autocratic blueprint requires total dominance over the information landscape. The state systematically swallows competing broadcast nodes. Without a strict monopoly over this architecture, the ruling administration cannot dictate how crises are interpreted by the public. When Putin assumed the presidency in 2000, his control was fragile. Media-owning oligarchs possessed enough independent broadcast power to threaten his administration directly. The catalyst for consolidation was the Kursk submarine disaster in August 2000. Independent networks aired highly critical news reports regarding delayed rescue efforts, severely damaging Putin's cultivated strongman image. Putin launched a systematic retaliation. Exploiting legal loopholes and leveraging state prosecution, the Kremlin forced major oligarchs like Vladimir Gusinsky and Boris Berezymsky into exile. By the end of his first term, all of Russia's major television networks were folded into direct or indirect Kremlin control. Xi Jinping faced a different structural challenge. In China, the independent nodes were embedded within the state itself, specifically the academic independence of universities and the grassroots organizational power of the Communist Youth League. Xi captured these institutions by weaponizing the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection. He utilized sweeping anti-corruption drives to purge dissenting factions and enforce strict ideological compliance within these academic and youth organizations. Whether through corporate media takeovers or internal party purges, monopolizing the informational apparatus provides the foundation for constructing a new national reality. Once the architecture is secured, it must be filled. The regime engineers a bespoke ideology, placing the leader at the center of the national identity. In late 2012, at the National Museum of China, Xi introduced a vague propaganda slogan, "The Chinese Dream," defined simply as the great rejuvenation of the nation. State media systematically expanded this phrase. Within a few years, dreaming the Chinese way became the explicit justification for specific state policies, absorbing everything from military modernization to ecological progress. The concept soon dictated foreign policy, serving as the ideological foundation for the International Belt and Road Initiative. Putin engaged in a parallel ideological construction by crafting a tailored hero persona. Emerging from anonymity, Putin was marketed as a youthful, energetic man of action. He leveraged the Second Chechen War to project unyielding strength and competence. Over time, Kremlin narrative engineers expanded this persona. They integrated the Russian Orthodox Church into state proceedings, merging loyalty to the president with religious identity. To unify a fractured demographic base, spanning from free market neoliberals to post-Soviet communists, Putin anchored his rhetoric in the glorification of World War II victories, drawing everyone under a single patriotic banner. Neither the Chinese dream nor Putin's state-sponsored patriotism are organic cultural developments. They are precision-engineered vehicles, designed specifically to evolve as the regime requires. By making the leader indistinguishable from the nation's spiritual and historical destiny, the state ensures that any political opposition is viewed as outright treason. When economic promises cannot be met, the state executes a systemic pivot known in Marxist theory as shifting the principal contradiction, redefining society's core problem. Xi Jinping officially declared a new era for China, explicitly moving the national struggle away from basic wealth accumulation and economic development. He framed the new societal threat as unbalanced development and global disorder. To survive this, he argued, the country required a 33-year plan guided exclusively by Xi Jinping thought. Putin executed a parallel pivot following the 2008 global financial crisis, a move rapidly accelerated by domestic protests against his return to the presidency. This DS shows how Putin's propaganda narrative reversed course. His administration abandoned its early 2000s focus on Western integration, replacing it with an anti-Western narrative. Looking at target demographics, the Kremlin abandoned urban elites, heavily pivoting toward rural, provincial conservatives. This allowed Putin to manufacture the enemy within. State media began framing domestic political opposition and urban liberals as a Western-backed fifth column out to destroy the nation. Foreign adventurism was then deployed to validate this narrative. Military interventions in Ukraine and Syria were engineered to trigger a domestic rally around the flag effect, distracting the public from internal economic stagnation. In China, Xi's massive military modernization and geopolitical assertiveness across the Indo-Pacific serve the exact same unifying domestic function. By constructing a besieged fortress mentality, the regime replaces the public's desire for wealth with a desperate demand for security. It intentionally traps the population into a dependency on the strongman. The ultimate goal of autocratic stagecraft is not temporary high polling. The objective is absolute, permanent legal immunity. By the years 2017 and 2018, both regimes successfully converted decades of psychological narrative control into formal institutional structures. At the 19th Communist Party Congress, Xi Jinping successfully forced his personal ideology, Xi Jinping thought, directly into the text of the Chinese Constitution. This ideological elevation provided the legal justification required for Xi to completely abolish presidential term limits, clearing his path to rule indefinitely. Putin achieved a parallel success during the 2018 Russian election, easily securing a fourth presidential term. He guaranteed this victory by utilizing his media monopoly to systematically assassinate the character of any viable political opposition before a single ballot was cast. Total narrative dominance allowed both leaders to maintain their positions through structural economic crises that threatened the stability of their regimes. The modern autocratic model treats narrative control as the foundational infrastructure of the state itself, a system designed to make a reality without the leader conceptually impossible.